Alors, bonjour et un grand bienvenue à tout le monde aujourd'hui d'être avec nous pour cette 6e édition et le 10e anniversaire du colloque Media Art Histories, Recreate Theories, Methods and Practice. And it's a beautiful day, c'est une journée magnifique. On est très excités de vous accueillir parce que ça fait près d'1 an et demi que nous travaillons sur ce colloque. Et de voir tous ces visages réunis ici, toutes ces personnes, je crois que nous allons avoir des journées formidables d'échanges. Déjà, il y a eu le symposium des chercheurs émergents hier. Ce matin, l'événement panel Bridge avec Nina Tsiglady. Alors, on est déjà engagé dans un processus d'échange. Et vous avez vu certainement que nous essayons de faire les choses un peu différemment, même si on est dans un colloque traditionnel. La disposition des tables, la notion de discussion entre les intervenants et aussi la position des chaises que vous pouvez déplacer à tout moment dans l'espace. Ça va permettre, je pense, que des reconfigurations constantes dans les discussions. Nous le voyons comme une synergie, une plateforme, une autre manière d'être ensemble pour favoriser ces échanges. Alors, on a un programme étoffé, on a bien sûr tous les panels qui sont présentés, d'abord dans cet espace ici et au 4e étage d'Hexagramme UQAM qui est dans l'édifice à côté. Alors, à partir de demain matin, il y aura les panels doubles qui vont se passer en même temps. Nous avons les 3 conférences d'honneur, nous sommes très fiers. Donc, Joan Jonas qui va présenter ce soir, Christine Vanache demain et Skawanati samedi. Nous avons les œuvres des membres d'Hexagramme, dont plusieurs vernissages ce soir qui se passera à l'Université Concordia, les lancements de livres et bien sûr un numéro spécial sur la recherche-création qui a été produit avec les membres d'Hexagramme, coédité par plusieurs membres et avec des invités internationaux. Et en plus de tout ça, nous avons une série d'événements satellites dans la communauté de Montréal qui sont indiqués dans le programme. Alors, on vous invite à venir voir toute la grande fertilité des activités à Montréal. Donc, d'abord, merci au Fonds de recherche du Québec, Société Culture, à la Fondation canadienne de l'innovation qui nous permet de faire ce colloque, Hexagramme Réseau, Hexagramme UQAM, de l'UQAM, la Faculté des arts, le doctorat en études et pratiques des arts, le doctorat conjoint en communication, UQAM Concordia, l'Université de Montréal, et à Concordia, the Office of Research, the Concordia Institute for Digital Media, and the Faculty of Fine Arts. And I'd like to give a special thank you to our team, because without them, none of this would be occurring. First and foremost is Manuel Frère, la personne clé de tout cet événement avec qui vous avez certainement communiqué à tellement de reprises par courriel. Je ne sais pas où est Manuel. Est-ce qu'elle est là? Elle est de l'autre côté, mais on va l'inviter tout à l'heure. Alors, merci. Une personne fantastique, efficace, ouverte, attentionnée. On t'aime beaucoup, Manuel. Merci de ton engagement. Jason Pomrensky à la direction technique et toute l'équipe technique qui supporte l'événement. Nina Tsiglady qui a préparé le bridge. Et ce qu'on essaie de faire, c'est un événement éco-responsable dans la mesure du possible avec des déchets amoindris, moins de plastique. Alors, on fait des efforts à cet égard-là. Et je vous invite aussi à suivre le blog qui a été commencé hier par les intervenants et qui prenaient les notes. Et à chaque jour, il va y avoir des additions de textes sur le blog, sur le site d'Hexagramme. Alors, merci et bienvenue.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Very glad to see you all here, and after 10 years, to be back with the Media Art Histories Conference in Canada. In his opening address, Roger Molina, co-organizer of the first conference in Banff, coined a phrase with double meaning, quote, "We are here to write history." And in fact, it happened. After the Banff Center, Berlin's House of World Cultures, the University of Melbourne, FACT, Liverpool, Riga. It is fantastic that we are back on the American continent. Let's call it Media Art History's motherland. And although this term does not sound completely appropriate, Canada, with all its theorists and historians, artists, and leading institutional people, is very important, as we know, for our so international field. And I'm glad to see familiar faces here in the room among us. This conference series started with a first meeting in Nagoya in 2002 with Sarah Diamond, Roger Molina, and me, with a simple idea to give some common ground to all those colleagues who work on digital and other media art forms and their histories in a number of different disciplines, not then yet strongly connected. And after a lot of preparation at Humboldt University in Berlin, a brainstorm meeting at Villa Vigoni in Italy, and intensive work with an international board, we ended up with a number of disciplines in Banff, forming our new field: art history, media, film and cultural studies, history of science, and history of technology were the strongest among them. Our field is growing, some people think, and I agree, not fast enough. If you Google digital art, for example, you get 30 million hits. Media art and new media art together, 5.3 million. And if you Google its scholarly counterpart, media art history, you end up with more than 200,000 hits. Media archaeology makes another 80,000. And although media art plays a role in about 200 biennials around the world, so some role at least, and there are more than 100 festivals dedicated only to media art all over the world, some of them are gone, some new pop up, it is still only barely arriving, as we know, into the core collecting institutions of our societies. The museums, archives, libraries, funded by us in many countries, the tax-paying public. So we should not look what the art market, which has different interests, as we know, is doing. The exclusion of contemporary digital art from relevant public collections is evidently also a problem for our democratic societies. And it is no exaggeration to state that we face the total loss of an art form from the early times of our post-industrial digital societies. The storage and preservation problem led, historically speaking, to the largest iconoclasm in human history. A systematic preservation infrastructure, though, a systematic preservation infrastructure, which we don't have, requires the conjunction of museums and archives into bigger, concerted expert networks, but this isn't even discussed yet. And although there is no week without another opening of a related professorship and new programs, also my own university just opened the Erasmus Plus Media Arts Cultures Joint Master of Excellence together with Aalborg. I saw just Morten Sondergaard and Lodge. Richard Kluschinski is here too, and City University in Hong Kong with Jeffrey Shaw and others. The European Union supports with 13 full scholarships plus travel and living costs each year, so it's really fantastic conditions. Nevertheless, programs like that, our field is still underrepresented at universities and without the needed scientific tools. Already in 2012, we therefore facilitated the International Liverpool Declaration, which demands long-term and international research funding for the development of necessary infrastructures of our field. And since Rewire in Liverpool, it has been signed by more than 500 prominent researchers and museum directors from 40 countries to support a change in funding policies so that the humanities can do their job in the 21st century. So everybody also here in the room, please feel free to sign as well and use the declaration for your own applications. Let me in this context announce the presentation of the Archive of Digital Art, ADA, this Saturday evening. ADA is a collective scholarly research instrument you can become a member of with your own profile as artist or scholar. And we now will start with a new feature, probably interesting for many of you, called virtual exhibitions, starting with Christiane Paul's landmark exhibitions, her already historic exhibitions at New York's Whitney. And this year also, for the first time, the International Media Art Histories Award will be presented by the conference series for the lifetime achievement of a scholar in the field. And I would like to invite you all to join the ceremony on Saturday afternoon to honor our world-famous colleague, Barbara Stafford. So now, I want to wish all of us a great conference. 2 years ago, the board was excited to announce the winning proposal of the Montreal host by Chris Salter and Gisèle Trudel, which left 5 competitors behind. So we followed the call and the selection process and look now forward for an exciting conference with important, sometimes even hot topics that take us into the next decade of media art histories. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering together here today on Haudenosaunee territory. I also want to second Gisèle and warmly welcome everybody here to Montreal for Recreate, the 6th Annual International Conference in the Histories of Media, Art, Science, and Technologies, organized by Hexagram and its two founding universities, the University of Quebec at Montreal at UQAM and Concordia University. And obviously the weather gods have been looking down on us from above and given us this amazing weather for the conference weekend. In his posthumously published 1968 work, Theory of the Avant-Garde, the Italian art historian Renato Poglioli links early 20th century art movements at the dawn of the machine age to the increased tendency of artists at the time to frame their work in what we now think of as the languages of science: experiment, research, laboratory. For Poglioli, artistic practices influenced and indeed overcome by the science and technologies of their time function as a laboratory or a proving ground, which, he argues, quote, reveals concepts of artistic practice that are not mere metaphor and that differ radically from previous art historical ones. The laboratory and the proving ground serve not only to train the artist to a level of perfection, but also aim to advance the technological and scientific progress of art itself, unquote. If we fast forward the clock now more than 100 years from the initial movements that Poglioli references, futurism, cubism, constructivism, Dada, and so on, we can now see that the terms experiment, research, laboratory are still with us in the discourses of art, media, science, and technology. Thus, Recreate 2015 proposes to interrogate this complex of research, experiment, and laboratory with a central question: what theories, methods, and techniques can be used to understand past, present, and indeed future paradigms of creative material practice involving technologies from research context, historically and critically. This is a timely question, for as we know, the issue of how material-based practices within technical culture create new forms of knowledge and experience has been explicit and central to the historical roots of media art, design, science, and technology. Now, it goes without saying that the opportunities and problematics afforded by the links between research and practice and the range of international models these links offer, practice-based research, research-based practice, art research, artistic research, and research creation, several of the paradigms that are around today, these are increasingly gaining steam across international academic, cultural, and policy contexts. Whether in universities, art world spectacles, i.e. Documenta 13 is a good example, media art centers, independent artists, funding agencies, and even policy bodies, creative-led research seems to be on the minds of all of us in our exhibition signage, our manuscript pages, our grant applications, and our works themselves. In institutionalized settings, the notion of research signifies new knowledge that coherently and systematically advances a field, is grounded and supported by established methods and techniques, and is validated by both social frameworks, i.e. peers, and already existing bodies of knowledge, models, and paradigms. At first glance, however, the focus on originality, individual genius, and invention that is propagated in art and outside the norms of these research frameworks seems to fly in the face of the discursive formations that institutionally sanctioned research implies. Yet the rapid inclusion of artistic disciplines involving technological cultural instruments, concepts, methods in research, and to their granting agencies and policy bodies has facilitated the emergence of paradigms along with a host of questions about practice, method, and the validation that these paradigms imply or even challenge. Despite this seemingly paradigmatic shift, many of us, however, within academic and even cultural institutions, seem to be stewing in a sea of confusion about what research as a paradigm, as a political, technical, social act, entails for making things in the world, whether art and design-based universities or even cultural centers. Because of the long histories involving the entanglement of the humanities and the social sciences, In addition to the more accepted discussed areas of science and technology, the media arts are therefore an ideal site in which to explore the historical origin of these paradigms around research-driven practice and the lessons, ideas, concepts, and visions that such past work might offer us today and in the future. For example, what do we make of the nexus of artists and engineers in corporate R&D environments like IBM, Xerox, and Bell Labs in the 1960s? The integration of cybernetics, experimental psychology, and anthropology into the practices of artists and designers, the evolution of international sites and practices outside of the North American, European, and Japanese axis, the influence of methods from STS, critical race studies, sensory and sound studies on the development of media art and technology, or the shift toward curating itself as a research process. But other themes, actually, from the Emerging Researchers Conference arose this morning. The migration of disciplines from one field to another, the question of history and how we write it without falling back into anthropocentrisms, whether this international conference is in fact a global conference, the problem of materiality in practice, in writing about practice, and in writing through practice. What is radical in terms of making and thinking now? These are some of the themes that came up in the ER conference. Recreate 2015 therefore seeks to broadly interrogate the historical entanglements of research and practice related to the intertwined histories of media art, science, and technology within a wide and diverse network of sites, disciplines, and practices. Since 2001, Hexagram, the International Network for Research, Creation, in Media Art, Design, Technology, and Digital Culture, has vigorously debated these themes and has played a major role in Quebec, Canada, and now internationally, enabling and sustaining new forms of art, design, and performance to emerge within the frameworks of technological culture. The theme of Recreate 2015 continues those discussions that we've been conducting over the years, involving a range of scholars, practitioners, and local and international and national policymakers, including many of you in the audience today. Thus, on behalf of Hexagram, we're very proud to organize this 10th anniversary of the Recreate conferences, and hope to be able to follow up and extend those discussions that have been going on here in Quebec to the international community and for you to bring your conversations to us here. Okay, before we proceed with the opening plenary, which I'll introduce quickly, a word about the schedule. And there's a lot of things going on, so just to give you a bit of a sense of what's going on. The plenary this morning, or this afternoon, will run till around 3:15. There's a break then for about an hour and a half to almost 2 hours that will be followed by the opening reception that's going to take place at Concordia University down the street on the 11th floor of the Engineering and Visual Arts building on St. Catharines Street. And that is the opening reception at 5 o'clock, starting at 5 o'clock. There will be also a tour of some of the facilities of the Hexagram Network and also the new Institute for Digital Culture, Arts, and Technology, Concordia, where Hexagram is based. And you'll get to see some of these facilities and projects going on. At 6:30 then, downstairs on the first floor, will be basically a plenary mangling methodologies in biological art and display practices, which involve researchers involved here in the conference like Jens Hauser, also the biophysicist Andrew Pelling, and students of Tanguy Duff, a Hexagram member, who are presenting work in the Faculty of Fine Arts Gallery this evening that opens at 7:15. So at 7:15 then, after that plenary, which is downstairs, at 7:15 open a number of different exhibitions in the FOFA Gallery, in the vitrine outside of the FOFA Gallery, and then down in the Hexagram Black Box, a new robotic work from Bill Vaughan. And then the exhibition, as I said, opens around 7:15, and then at 8 o'clock is the opening keynote from Joan Jonas, who, of course, many of you know is a pioneering artist in media and performance, emeritus professor at MIT, and this year's exhibiting artist at the American Pavilion of the Venice Biennale. And also, just to clear up any confusion, Jussi Parikka will be giving a talk that's not part of this conference at 4 o'clock on the Loyola campus of Concordia. So if you are going to that, please come back, of course, to the other campus downtown at Concordia between 5 and 5:15. Tomorrow we're going to begin promptly at 9 o'clock. The speakers who are giving talks tomorrow, please make sure to see the technical team with your presentations beforehand. There are also parallel sessions that are happening in here as well as in Hexagram UQAM next door, and the volunteers in the lobby can help you find the way up there. We have also ample breaks tomorrow during the talks to enable discussion. During those breaks, there will be several book launches from participants involved in the conference that will take place in the space here, the chaufferie. And also, MIT Press has a display table. Doug Seri, Senior Acquisitions Editor of MIT Press, is here at the table as well during those breaks. So please visit the table. You can order books. You can't buy them, unfortunately, here because there's not enough books. And there's also a table in Hexagram if you're interested in knowing more about what we do. So there's a lot going on over the next few days.